Arirang TV is conducting an overseas TV viewer survey to provide you with a better global broadcast service. Share your valuable feedback on the Arirang TV website www.arirang.com or mobile application. Survey participants will be selected at random to receive special gifts. 2025 Arirang Overseas TV Viewer Survey. We look forward to hearing from you.
Drawing more fans from all over the world. Local consumer prices continue to hover at the 2% since rate in April.
Turning to robots to allow the visually impaired the chance to better indulge in cultural experiences. Like the number of hybrid cars are registered in South Korea has surpassed 2 million using its locally developed Yuri rocket.
Arirang.
The moment we wear it, our spirits lift. It helps us grow strong in body and in mind. As we wear it, we learn patience and respect. The belt system motivates students to strive harder and continue growing. This uniform shapes movement into grace and turns performance into something thrilling. Now, embraced around the world, Taekwondo shares our culture, philosophy, and values with pride and spirit. Though it may seem simple, this uniform holds your passion and your journey. It belongs to Taekwondo. Wear the extraordinary. Be with Taekwondo.
On Monday, President Lee Jae Myung and Vietnam's top leader To Lam held summit talks in Seoul, where the two sides adopted a joint declaration on deepening the comprehensive strategic partnership established 3 years ago. They also pledged to realize a trade volume of $150 billion by 2030. Seoul and Hanoi also signed a joint project to further nurture their cultural cooperation, such as diversifying South Korean content with Vietnam. And President Lee has granted special Liberation Day pardons to nearly 2,200 individuals. Included is Jo Guk, former head of the Minor Rebuilding Korea Party, who's currently serving a 2-year prison term over a college admissions scandal involving his daughter and abuse of power over a government audit. President Lee Jae Myung hosted Vietnam's political leader To Lam today in Seoul to bolster cooperation in a host of areas. And now, one particular focus was on sharply increasing bilateral trade volume. Our Presidential Office correspondent Yoon Jung-min starts us off.
The summit began on a friendly note with a handshake and a gun salute to welcome Vietnam's top political leader.
대한민국 새 정부 들어서서 첫 번째 국빈 방문이십니다. 그만큼 우리가 베트남을 중히 여기고 있다는 점을.
The sentiment was mirrored by Vietnam's Communist Party leader To Lam as he invited President Lee and the First Lady to Vietnam in the near future.
I'm honored to be invited. I congratulate President Lee Jae Myung for being elected as the 21st President of the Republic of Korea.
Monday's summit talks yielded deliverables to further deepen the South Korea-Vietnam Comprehensive Strategic Partnership.
올해 한-베트남 FTA 발효 10주년을 맞아 우리 양국은 2030년까지 교역 규모 1,500억 불 목표를 달성하기 위한 노력을 더욱 강화해 나가기로 하였습니다.
Last year, bilateral trade reached nearly $87 billion, with Vietnam being South Korea's third largest trading partner. There are other areas of cooperation.
We agreed to focus on developing strategic infrastructure, such as infrastructure related to transportation, energy, digital, and climate change.
South Korea hopes to take part in large-scale infrastructure projects in Vietnam, including its nuclear power plant project and North-South Express Railway project. Focus was also on strengthening cooperation on AI, renewable energy, critical minerals, and copyright, for which an array of MOUs were signed. And the meeting was crucial in more ways than one. The new South Korean leader shared his vision for peace and prosperity on the Korean peninsula, as Lam welcomed the South Korean government's efforts to resume dialogue with North Korea. The Vietnamese leader, for his part, noted the importance of peace and freedom of navigation in the South China Sea. On the diplomatic front, the two leaders agreed upon cooperation on multilateral forums, as South Korea and Vietnam serve as hosting countries of the APEC summit in 2025 and 2027, respectively. Also, exchanges will be expanded at parliamentary and municipal levels. And as a clear reflection of the importance of people-to-people and cultural exchanges, First Lady Kim Hae-kyung hosted the spouse of Vietnam's top leader, Ngo Phong Lee, at the National Museum of Korea in Seoul. To Lam's visit to Korea, the first of its kind in 11 years, involves a dinner hosted by the South Korean president with heads of major South Korean businesses, including SK and Hyundai Motor Groups. Seoul's top office says Monday's summit signals the start of East pragmatic diplomacy in earnest. This comes at a time when the global trade environment is becoming increasingly unstable. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Continuing with the Vietnamese leaders' visit to South Korea, the two countries also explored ways to cooperate in the cultural field, as their related ministers also got together today. Our culture correspondent Park Kwon-woo has more.
I'm abandoning my mom. This recent popular movie in Vietnam surpassed the break-even point in the country just 3 days after its release. What's notable is that it's a Korea-Vietnam co-production, starring popular actors from both countries. More such collaborations are expected as the culture ministers of Korea and Vietnam met in Seoul. to explore ways for sustainable growth in the culture industry.
Since establishing a comprehensive strategic partnership in 2023, we've strengthened cooperation in various sectors. With our ties closer than ever, it's time to take cultural exchange and cooperation to the next level. We see the culture industry's potential and ripple effects as a key driver of future economic growth.
Vietnam has also signaled its commitment to cultural cooperation, following its recently unveiled national strategy to build a culture industry centered on digital transformation.
Korea is a culturally advanced country whose new technologies add significant value to its cultural industries. We hope to learn from Korea's expertise to further develop our industries as we share cultural common ground.
Positive messages from both sides led to MOUs being signed between companies from both countries on Monday, covering joint film and game projects.
Korean content are very popular in Vietnam, from music to drama series to movie. And I'm very happy that this year the collaboration extends into another level. Co-produce a Vietnam-Korean movie with the original story. We will be filming in March and releasing end of 2026.
And more Korean companies are diversifying their content creation with their Vietnamese counterparts.
We're exploring collaborations such as remaking films with our IP and co-producing Vietnamese dramas or casting Vietnamese actors in our dramas. While there may be cultural sensitivities or differing social norms, these can be addressed from the early planning stages.
Korea's Culture Ministry also announced plans including financing and tax incentives in the cultural field on Monday, with the aim for the industry to generate 300 trillion won in revenue by 2030. With more of these efforts paving the way for broader collaboration between the two countries, more cultural content is expected down the road. Park Eun-woo, Arirang News.
South Korean President Lee Jae Myung issued his Liberation Day special pardons today. The clemency list spans high-profile politicians, business leaders, and members of the public. Our top office correspondent Song Yujin has the details.
With South Korea's National Liberation Day on Friday, the customary presidential pardons have been announced. At an extraordinary cabinet meeting on Monday, clemency was granted to 2,188 people.
This round of pardons is aimed at responding to the call for national unity, creating an opportunity to overcome division and conflict, and revitalizing the struggling economy amid global uncertainty.
At the center of attention is Cho-guk, former head of the Minor Rebuilding Korea Party. Cho, who served as Justice Minister and senior presidential aide to former President Moon Jae-in, has been serving a 2-year prison term since last December for academic fraud involving his children and unlawfully interfering with a government-led corruption inspection.
The Rebuilding Korea Party is an opposition party, and Cho-guk is not a close associate of President Lee. In fact, he's among those whose pardons were widely requested by figures from various political and religious circles.
Pardoned with the restoration of rights, Cho can run for public office again, with the speculation that he may enter the 2026 local elections. Also among the 27 pardoned politicians is former lawmaker Yoon Mi-hyang, convicted of embezzling funds from a civic group supporting Korean wartime sex slaves known as Comfort Women. The main opposition People Power Party blasted the pardons as a, quote, reward for regime change. The pardons this time also aim to boost people's livelihoods.
We expect pardons for key business leaders to help create jobs and drive dynamic growth, while clemency for small business owners and self-employed workers will support stability and recovery in the local economy.
Notable names include former SK Networks chairman and CEO Choi Shin-won. Others include those who were sent to labor facilities for failing to pay court-imposed fines, as well as taxi and bus drivers. The first round of pardons under the new administration will take effect this Friday. Song Yujin, Arirang News.
With a tariff deal now behind them, the leaders of South Korea and the U.S. are looking ahead to what could be their first ever summit within this month, which would reshape the two countries' security alliance, says Victor Cha, the Korea chair at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Our Kim Jung-sil reports.
The tariff deal announced late last month may have dominated headlines, but for veteran Korea watcher Victor Cha, its biggest impact is on the agenda it clears the way for.
Now that this has kind of been at least in a framework agreement stage, that really opens up space for the two leaders to talk about all the other things that are important in the alliance. They can get back to talking about the issues that matter on security, on the military, on defense and deterrence.
That, he says, could set the stage for adjustments not just in policy, but in the alliance itself.
I think they will. There will be some changes coming to the alliance. We've already seen them on the economic side, but there could also be some coming on the security side.
Could you give us an example of what changes could come, and if you can just predict?
We know very clearly that President Trump wants Korea to pay more for the stationing of U.S. forces in Korea. On the Korean side, the Lee government, progressive governments in general, have been very focused on trying to return OPCON transition. So that's something that could certainly come up. And President Trump has made no secret of his desire to reduce the U.S. military footprint in Korea and including the number of ground troops that are in Korea. So those are three big areas where we could see potential change.
Dr. Cha says any troop drawdown could be part of a broader alliance modernization, pairing fewer ground forces with more air and naval power and stronger South Korean intelligence and surveillance.
If that's all packaged together as part of a dual effort to modernize the alliance, then I think you don't have any problems. Then I don't think you hurt deterrence, you strengthen the alliance.
But he warns that acting without consultation could have the opposite effect.
But if the United States just starts doing this unilaterally, just starts pulling forces unilaterally without much consultation, that can weaken the alliance and can also create miscalculation or misperception by the North Koreans and the Chinese that the alliance is weakening.
Still, he says a trade deal opens the door for talks on key security issues, and their first meeting could determine whether the allies move toward a stronger, more modern security partnership. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
North Korea has slammed the upcoming joint military drills between South Korea and the U.S. A reaction that is not too much of a surprise, but what's notable is that the statement came days after the North also took down its border speakers that broadcast propaganda directed at the South. Our Park Hyo-bin has this report.
North Korea has condemned an upcoming large-scale joint military exercise between South Korea and the United States. According to a report by the North's state-run Korean Central News Agency on Monday, Defense Minister Roh Kwang-chol had warned that Pyongyang would invoke its right to self-defense in response to any provocation. The warning came a week ahead of Seoul and Washington's annual summertime Ulji Freedom Shield exercise, set to run from August 18th to 28th. Experts say this is a clear sign that the North is seeking to permanently end the Allied exercises.
This is not the first time that North Korea has criticized ROK-U.S. joint military exercise. Since Trump has inaugurated and North Korea has continued to raise questions and criticize ROK-U.S. alliance, and this is a very clear proposal that North Korea has definitely wanted to stop or permanent halt of ROK-U.S. joint military exercise.
In response to Pyongyang's denunciation, Seoul's Ministry of National Defense said,
"The ROK-U.S. combined exercises are annual defensive drills to maintain a strong joint defense posture, contributing to peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula and beyond. The defense authorities from both nations are closely coordinating their execution."
North Korea's warning comes despite recent signs of a potential de-escalation by the reclusive state. Last Saturday, Pyongyang began dismantling some loudspeakers installed along its border, which were previously used for noise campaigns against South Korea. The move by the North came just days after Seoul completed removing border loudspeakers, a move aimed at reducing inter-Korean tensions last Tuesday. In response, Seoul's Ministry of Unification welcomed North Korea's swift removal of its border loudspeakers.
Regarding North Korea's dismantling of propaganda loudspeakers along the border, our government assesses Pyongyang's swift action in removing its own loudspeakers, following our removal of anti-Pyongyang loudspeakers, positively.
While the dismantling of loudspeakers hint at easing tensions, North Korea's hardline stance over the drills suggests the road to reconciliation will be far from smooth. Park Hoo-bin, Arirang News.
The commander of U.S. Forces Korea stressed the importance of defense skill over troop size when asked to define the term alliance modernization. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung has this report.
Capabilities over size. That is what General Xavier Brunson, the commander of the United States Forces Korea, emphasized when asked to define alliance modernization. This follows concerns in Seoul over a possible reduction of U.S. troops on the Korean peninsula for strategic flexibility. The general did not directly mention any troop reduction, but he did highlight the need for Seoul to acknowledge strategic flexibility as well, citing the example of Patriot batteries that have been temporarily moved to the Middle East, but that are expected to return with upgrades.
And whenever things of strategic flexibility happen, I think that the onus is on this command, read me, to ensure that our allies understand what I'm doing. But there's nothing that says that we can't move to where we need to be in support of my own nation and our own objectives.
The general underlined that the ROK-U.S. alliance is not just dealing with North Korea, which he called the closest alligator to the boat, but also with Russia and China, which both have strong links with Pyongyang.
What's being asked of Korea is to be stronger against DPRK, that we might have the flexibility as we modernize our alliance so that we could go do other things.
Against such a backdrop, the issue of transferring wartime operational control, the OPCON transfer, was brought up as well. General Brunson said rushing things would hurt readiness and that conditions need to be bilaterally agreed upon.
Now, if we choose to take shortcuts, that could endanger the readiness of the force here on the peninsula. So I think that our approach has to be one that is, again, bilaterally managed, bilaterally considered, and bilaterally assessed in order to get to that point.
The allies are slated to go ahead with the annual Ulchi Freedom Shield starting next week. Some outdoor exercises have been adjusted, but the general says he is comfortable with the decision and asks the allies will still exercise fully. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
It's Monday, which means it's time to take a look at what's been happening in the world of sports. We have our sports editor, Paul Neat, joining us in the studio. Welcome back, Paul.
Thank you.
So, Paul, why don't we start with football? Heung-min made his MLS debut. Tell us more.
That's right, yes. Son on Saturday, local time, officially made his MLS debut for Los Angeles FC.
Right.
And, well, he wasted no time in making an impact as well. He came off the bench in the second half against the Chicago Fire and used his signature pace and close control to cause havoc for the Fire defence. In the 77th minute, he was fouled inside the box, winning a penalty that Dennis Bouanga converted to level the match at 2-2. LAFC had earlier equalised in the first half before falling behind again, but Son's involvement ensured that they came away with a point. LAFC are 5th in the Western Conference and take on the New England Revolution this Saturday, where Son could make his full debut.
Right, off to a good start. Staying in the U.S. but moving on to MLB, a home run for Kim Ha-sung.
Yes, his first in around a month as well. On Sunday, Kim batted 2 for 3 with 2 RBIs and 1 run scored, also drawing a walk against the Seattle Mariners. But his team, the Tampa Bay Rays, lost the match 6-3. Batting 7th, Kim hit a double to left off starter Brian Wu in the top of the 2nd. It was Kim's 2nd double of the season and his first since July 9th. His home run came in the 4th inning, hitting a fastball. It was his first home run since July 10th and was his 2nd of the season. The day before, meanwhile, Lee Jong-hoo of the San Francisco Giants matched his season best run of recording a hit for the 8th game in a row. He went 1 for 4 in a 4-2 loss to the Washington Nationals. The hit came in the very last inning with an infield single in what was his final appearance at the plate.
Paul, staying with baseball, but moving on to the KBO, another attendance milestone.
Another one, yes, 9 million fans now after 528 games. This is the fastest the league has ever hit that milestone. The previous record was 610 games set last season. In fact, the KBO has only ever surpassed 9 million once before, and that was last year. The overall record is 10.8 million. Officials and analysis say that the league is on pace to surpass the single-season attendance record and even get as high as 12 million. All 10 clubs together are averaging around 18,000 fans per match, which is up 16% from this point last season.
Paul, last but not least, to golf. 2 South Koreans have qualified for the second leg of the PGA Tour playoffs. Tell us more.
That's right, yeah. We have Kim Si-woo and Im Sung-jae who have reached the next phase. Both put in good displays in the first tournament of the annual series over the weekend. On Sunday at the FedEx St. Jude Championship in Memphis, Tennessee, Kim Si-woo finished tied for 14th at 8 under par, 272. Im Sung-jae finished 1 stroke behind Kim to tie for 17th. Kim jumped from number 46 to 41st in the FedEx Cup standings, while Im moved up from 29 to 25. Only those in the top 70 were able to go to the next phase, and the top 50 from the weekend's competition advanced to the B&W Championship, which starts this Thursday.
Great stuff, Paul. Thank you as always. I'll see you next Monday.
Thank you. Yeah, see you.
With the whole country cloudy today, it has been raining in the southern parts of the country. Jeju Island, where a heavy rain advisory has been issued, is covered by dark clouds with thick rain pouring down. This rain clouds will spread to the southern parts of the country. Looking at the expected amount of rainfall by tomorrow, about 100 millimeters of heavy rain is forecast on the south coast, 20 to 80 millimeters in Gyeongsang-namdo Province, 10 to 60 millimeters in Jeollanam-do Province and Jeju Island, 5 to 40 millimeters in Jeollabuk-do and southern Gyeongsang-buk-do provinces, and 5 millimeters in other areas. Tomorrow morning, Seoul will start off at 24 degrees Celsius, Daegu and Gyeongju at 21 degrees. Daily highs move up to 33 degrees in Seoul and Chuncheon, 28 degrees in Busan. On Wednesday and Thursday, it will rain in the central parts of the country. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. For all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.
전기 요거 맡긴 거 확인하느라고.
이 작은 거 하나가 너무 신기해요. 모든 걸 다 제가 할 수 있다라는 게.
도락해서 좋고요. 또 화재 위험성도 없고 끄고 켜는 게 일단은 쉬워요. 누르기만 하면 돼요. 그래서 다 좋습니다.
지금까지는 전기를 아낀다는 것이 전원 코드를 수동으로 뽑거나 또 전등 스위치 끄는 것들이 사실 불편하고 귀찮아서 잘 안 하게 되거든요. 근데 저희 시스템은 이런 것들을 자동화해서 전기료를 대폭 절감하고 또 화재 예방 역할도 하고 또 온실가스 감축도 됩니다. 또한 아낀 전기를 판매해서 보상을 얻을 수 있는 국가제도인 DR에도 참여가 가능한데요. 그리고 ESG 경영에도 기여할 것으로 보고 있습니다.
저희가 금융업무에 사용하는 전산기기가 많아 전기 사용량이 많은 편입니다. 건물 건축 후 태양광 시설을 설치하여 전기료 절감을 하고 있으며 근본의 추가 금융기관 에너지 솔루션을 도입하여 에너지 절감함으로써 가장 손쉽게 온실가스 감축을 위해 노력하고 있습니다.
자발적인 탄소 감축 시장의 확대를 위해 중소기업이나 소규모 단체에 적용시킬 수 있는 탄소 발생량 및 탄소 감축량의 측정 방법을 개발하고 있으며 특히 재단에서 운영하는 기후성과 평가 및 탄소 감축 인증은 각 기업들이 자신들의 탄소 배출량의 현재 상황을 파악하여 기후위기에 적극적으로 대응하고 동참하도록 돕고 있습니다.
제가 갖고 있는 꿈은 국민 보급형 에너지 전략 시스템을 만들어서 저렴한 가격의 에너지 시스템을 보급하고 또 국가 제도에 부응하는 에너지 관리 시스템을 만들어서 국가 에너지 수요 효율화에 기여하고 싶습니다. 나는 전기를 아끼는 그리너입니다.
도시는 세계와 연결되어 문화를 창조했고 새로운 것을 받아들였다.
함께여서 우리는 더 자유롭고 더 멀리 갈 수 있어.
닫힌 문이 아니라
열린 질문으로
나에게 APEC은
자유,
융합,
국제성,
다양성,
포용,
개발, 신라의 정신이 APEC 2025로 이어집니다.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gyun. South Korean President Lee Jae Myung has opened a month of high-stakes summit diplomacy. It began today in Seoul with Vietnam's top political leader, Communist Party General Secretary To Lam, the first Vietnamese head of state visiting in 11 years. The two leaders pledged to deepen their comprehensive strategic partnership, aiming for $150 billion in trade by 2030 and boosting cooperation in energy, technology, and security sectors. Now, later this month, President Lee will also meet U.S. President Donald Trump to discuss modernizing the alliance, tariff negotiations, and also defense cost sharing. A Korea-Japan summit is also under discussion, with speculation it could happen first, potentially shaping talks with Washington. So for an overall discussion on how the array of talks could shape Seoul's regional strategy, we're joined by Evans Revere, former Acting Assistant Secretary of State of the U.S. and non-resident senior fellow in the Foreign Policy Program at Brookings. A big welcome.
Great to be with you.
And also joining us is Hana Kim, Associate Professor at Seogang University's GSIS. Good to see you, Professor.
Thanks for having me again.
Right, so let's begin our discussion right away. To start with the big picture first. So today in Seoul, President Lee Jae Myung met with Vietnam's top political leader, Communist Party General Secretary To Lam. Mr. Revere, so with this summit kicking off a month of intensive diplomacy for South Korea, also including talks with the U.S. and also Japan, what do you see as the top priorities of the Lee administration's diplomatic strategy?
Well, you're exactly right. This is going to be a pretty intensive period of South Korean diplomacy, and it'd be very interesting to see how it all plays out. From my perspective, I see four central priorities for the Republic of Korea under the new leadership in Seoul these days. I think the first priority, predictably, is managing relations with the Republic of Korea's only treaty ally, the United States. I think the goal, the diplomatic goal for the ROK, goes beyond what it normally would be for a U.S. ROK summit. In other words, it goes beyond just maintaining the traditional strength and solidarity in the U.S. ROK alliance. And I say that because for the first time in the history of this alliance, the United States is led by a president, Donald Trump, who does not necessarily believe in alliances in the conventional way. He has attempted to treat longtime allies as adversaries. He has claimed that America's allies are taking advantage of the United States, and he has sought to push allies, including the Republic of Korea, to take on greater security military burden sharing. The Trump presidency has called into question the U.S. commitments to its allies and partners in Europe and in Asia. And I think many of the longtime assumptions that America's allies once had about the reliability of the United States, those assumptions have been weakened and in some cases have evaporated. Trump has launched tariff wars, and as I said, he's made enormous demands for increased burden sharing, and he is now proposing, I believe, fundamental changes in the nature of the U.S. ROK alliance. So for all those reasons, the U.S. is the #1 diplomatic priority for the Republic of Korea, as it should be. The second priority, of course, is North Korea, which poses an existential threat to South Korea. The ROK has ambitious plans for re-engaging with North Korea. It's not at all clear that the DPRK shares South Korea's interest in re-engagement, but we'll see. The third top priority is how to deal with China and Russia. The new South Korean government continues to believe, against considerable evidence in my view, that Beijing and Moscow are prepared to be helpful in dealing with North Korea. In fact, China has drawn closer to Russia and to North Korea, and of course Russia is giving North Korea some real-world military experience, combat experience in the war against Ukraine, and is providing important military and technical assistance to the DPRK, thereby strengthening North Korea's ability to do serious damage to South Korea. And then the fourth priority for Seoul, I think, is stronger relations with Japan, Vietnam, and other regional powers and partners who, like the Republic of Korea, live in the shadow of a more aggressive and expansionist China, and who are trying to cope with a U.S. that seems to have lost its bearings, its traditional bearings, and its appetite for leadership. So those are the four top priorities. There are other priorities, but those are the first four that leap to mind.
Right. So managing its relations with South Korea's allies, of course, and also North Korea, China, and Russia would be very, very important for the nation. Now, let's go back to the latest summit with the Vietnamese leader. It really carries a lot of significance, of course, coming from, it's the first top leader of Vietnam coming to Korea in 11 years. And it's also the first head of state that comes to the Lee administration. Professor Kim, how do you see the significance of this?
I think it's quite significant. And I think President Lee also mentioned that this is significant, and we can see that it is for many different strategic, economic, and symbolic reasons. Economically, as of now, Vietnam serves as a key manufacturing and export hub with low labor costs, multiple free trade agreements, and many large Korean investors running their largest overseas operations there, including Samsung. So by hosting Tolam so early on, Lee might be signaling to Korean conglomerates or chaebols, including Samsung, LG, and SK, and others, that his administration is working to protect and expand their foothold in Vietnam. It can also open the door for new cooperation in semiconductors, green energy, and supply chain diversification away from China. And because of the U.S. tariffs on both South Korea and Vietnam, this visit can really mitigate some of these impacts, or the impacts of the tariffs, and bolster semiconductor and electronic supply chains. Strategically also, Vietnam has become a strategic outpost for countries seeking to balance relations between the United States and China. Now, in many ways, Vietnam kind of sits at the crossroads of Southeast Asia and the South China Sea. So because of this, it plays a really important role. And in fact, Vietnam can be viewed as a trusted Asian partner that can work in regional security dialogues, maritime issues, and multilateral forums like APEC. And also, just the relationship between South Korea and Vietnam, we've seen that the relationship between the two countries was upgraded to a comprehensive strategic partnership in 2022, putting Vietnam in Korea's top tier bilateral relationships. So because of these, stronger ties will bolster South Korea's aims to expand diplomatic and economic influence. In many ways, inviting Vietnam as the first state guest in this way might be a strategic choice. And by making Vietnam's top leader the first state guest, it's really symbolic, because it's a deliberate signal to China and to the United States that Seoul or South Korea is really cultivating its own key relationships that don't focus necessarily on big powers, but maybe possibly on other countries and other regional alliances.
Right. So it definitely seems to be a very good opportunity for both countries. Now, when we look at the results of the latest meeting that was held today, the two sides actually adopted a joint statement to deepen this, what Professor Kim has mentioned, Korea-Vietnam Comprehensive Strategic Partnership with future-oriented cooperation, of course. And they also set a goal to expand bilateral trade to $150 billion by 2030, and also signed over 10 MOUs on covering various industries. So, Professor Kim, how could this partnership bolster Korea's global middle power diplomacy strategy?
And so in many ways, I think the relationship or the partnership between the two countries is still developing. And I think this is just one of the first steps towards that. But because of this first step is actually showing that it really fits squarely into Korea's global middle power diplomacy playbook, because it's showing that South Korea is operating not just as a passive player in major power dynamics, but also as an active one of regional and sectoral cooperation. Now, first, the fact that South Korea is trying to strengthen its ties with Vietnam, a country that's considered to be Asia's rising economy and a key South China Sea actor, can help Korea avoid overdependence on some of the larger countries such as the United States or China. And because Vietnam is a leading ASEAN member with a lot of political clout in Southeast Asia, this can help in terms of the partnership as well, because South Korea can gain greater access and influence within ASEAN, and also it can use it as a platform to promote South Korea's values and policy priorities on issues like economic development, sustainable growth, and regional security. And as you mentioned, by setting the goal to expand bilateral trade between the two countries by $150 billion by 2030, in many ways, South Korea might be positioning itself as a regional economic hub, linking advanced industrial supply chains with fast-growing emerging markets. But also, this partnership just in general reinforces Korea's role as a middle power connector. The partnership is working hard to not just develop in terms of its economic and political ways, but culturally as well, because South Korea continues to really, show itself as a global player, especially in terms of soft power. And also, this partnership exemplifies strategic signaling in the Indo-Pacific. Vietnam, it has a very strategic location, and there are shared concerns between the two countries about supply chain resilience, maritime security, and technological sovereignty. And so as a result, these two countries really need each other, and so they're taking the first steps to really do this. But if South Korea sustains this momentum, then the Korea-Vietnam partnership really could serve as a flagship example of middle power diplomacy and reinforce Korea's global middle power diplomacy strategy if it's successful.
Wow. So we hope there would be a lot to look forward to between the two countries following the latest visit. Now, let's turn a little bit to the summit with America that's going to be held in a couple of days. Now, at the end of this month, a meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump is also scheduled for President Lee Jae Myung. And the key agenda item is modernizing the Korea-U.S. alliance. And it covers a broad scope, including adjustments to the role of the USFK too. Mr. Revere, what is this core of this alliance modernization, and what kind of diplomatic approach then South Korea could take in preparation for this?
Well, as various U.S. officials, including General Brunson, have been talking about these issues over the last several days, the scope of the meaning of this term of alliance modernization has become pretty clear. I think at a minimum it includes an expansion of the idea of the U.S. ROK alliance's concept of threats to include threats off the Korean Peninsula, elsewhere in the region, including perhaps Taiwan or China-related contingencies. I think it also includes allowing Korea-based U.S. forces to be used elsewhere in the region to deal with other contingencies that don't necessarily relate to the North Korean threat, which will remain the central mission of those forces on the Korean Peninsula. I think the term also includes the possible adjustment of the level of U.S. forces in Korea, the numbers of forces on the Korean Peninsula, perhaps to allow the transfer of some U.S. forces to duties elsewhere, either elsewhere in the Asia-Pacific or to other places, all the while, as General Brunson has stated, keeping the key capabilities that are necessary to defend the Republic of Korea in place on the Korean Peninsula. I think the U.S. definition of modernization of the alliance also includes a desire to see the Republic of Korea play an even greater role in its own defense, including by accelerating its acquisition of those capabilities that have already been defined as necessary to enable eventual transition of operational control of ROK forces, wartime operational control, to be transferred to the ROK. So the ROK at the summit is going to be faced with some very difficult choices, things that I suspect the current leadership in Seoul is not enthusiastic about doing. And I think it's going to be imperative for President Lee and his team to make very clear to the United States what is possible, but also what is not possible, and to seek a middle ground, if you will, between the ROK and the United States in terms of this path to a more modern, sophisticated, capable, and expanded alliance.
So a lot of sensitive issues are expected on the talks. But let's stay a little bit with the defense cost issue, Mr. Revere. So media outlets have been reporting that the Trump administration is considering to ask Korea to raise its defense spending to 3.8% of GDP and to increase its share of defense cost contributions. Do you think such demands would realistically be acceptable?
Well, we should keep in mind that the United States has already made even greater demands of America's NATO allies, and in some cases gotten some progress, although not exactly what Donald Trump might have wished for. I suspect that this summit, there's going to be, or in advance of this summit, I think it's already happening, there's going to be a lot of pressure applied on the Republic of Korea to boost its defense spending and to review its burden-sharing commitments with an eye towards increasing them. I personally, and a lot of experts I know, don't support the idea of imposing an artificial number or artificial percentage on defense spending for any country, including the United States. Ideally, your level of defense spending should depend on the nature of the threat and what sort of capabilities you are trying to develop to deal with that threat. And that is, I think, the argument that the Republic of Korea should make to the United States, that Korea knows best what it has, what it needs, and what the threat is, and is prepared to have a serious discussion with the United States about what level of spending is appropriate. But once again, I think at the end of the day, this is a sovereign decision for the Republic of Korea, and I hope the United States will respect South Korea's sovereign decision and its willingness to do whatever is necessary and whatever it deems appropriate to defend itself.
Now, the tariff talks will also be, of course, on the agenda for discussions between the two leaders. And they're expected to discuss the details of this $350 billion investment fund South Korea will do for the U.S. Professor Kim, what kind of strategic approach would you think would be necessary for Korea to gain a little bit of an advantage in these talks?
I think Korea needs to try to apply many different approaches because it's really hard to gauge how the Trump administration is going to be reacting. So one of the options might be that Korea may try to leverage its critical role in supply chain. So during the summit, Korea should really try to focus on highlighting its critical role, especially in global semiconductor, automotive, pharmaceutical, and technology supply chains. Korea should also try to emphasize that tariff relief and investment support are mutually beneficial, and that protecting and strengthening integrated supply chains are critical to U.S. industries as well as national security. Now, how much of that will be taken into consideration is a different story, but I think it would help if Korea continues to send this message. And also, Korea needs to show that it's a stable, innovative investment destination and that one that can partner with advanced infrastructure and a skilled workforce. So in that way, it should show that Korea's development goals align with U.S. priorities such as green technology, digital transformation, and semiconductor capacity expansion. And that would underscore how the $350 billion US fund can really accelerate shared objectives. And in addition to all of this, Korea should try to utilize the summit diplomacy as much as possible in terms of engaging in high-level diplomatic dialogue. In many ways, the summit is an opportunity that can be used to build trust and personal rapport between leaders that would essentially smoothen negotiations. And that, I think, is a method that Trump does tend to appreciate a little bit more. So during the summit, negotiations can be framed as a part of a broader U.S. Korea strategic partnership. And that would, I think, help. So the summit and in general should be framed not just as an economic form of support, but also one that can function as a catalyst for a long-term, more mutually beneficial partnership.
Right. So a two-track approach covering diplomacy and economy would be definitely helpful. Now, let's also touch upon Korea-Japan relations before we leave our discussion. So Japanese media outlets report that a summit is being coordinated for the 23rd, even though the presidential office has yet to confirm it. So, Mr. Revere, if the Korea-Japan summit were held before the Korea-U.S. summit, what would be its symbolism and diplomatic message?
Well, the ROK and Japan are natural partners. Both of them are U.S. allies, close and good U.S. allies. Both of them face immediate threats from North Korea. Both of them live in the shadow of an increasingly militarily capable China and Beijing's bullying behavior in the airspace and waters of the region. I think an early and successful ROK-Japan summit would send a very strong and positive signal that I think would be welcomed by Washington, that Seoul and Tokyo recognize the importance of tactical and strategic cooperation, and they recognize the importance of building on the progress that's already been made between Tokyo and Seoul in establishing a solid foundation for bilateral relations going forward. And so I think I don't see a problem with an early summit. As a matter of fact, since the United States has long advocated strong, close, cooperative ROK-Japan relations, and including, of course, trilateral relations with the United States, I think the United States would welcome the fact that the two countries are moving in a direction that the United States has long argued for.
Right, so it could even help boost trilateral cooperation between the three countries moving forward, right?
Yes.
All right, but as for now, we will have to conclude our discussion here at this point. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights tonight, Professor Kim.
Thank you.
And Mr. Revere, we really appreciate it.
You are welcome.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame tonight. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.
How to survive in Korea. One room. So, you're surviving in Korea if you signed a contract for a one-room